So we'll get right into it with the first set I'll be reviewing, which will be Waddle versus Asskadoodle. So one thing that's pretty well known about Asskadoodle is his main style, which revolves pressing buttons very little and using lively to his advantage to force his opponent to approach. And we're going to see that here against Waddle. So in this kind of scenario where Asskadoodle isn't taking many risks and just walking back, the best thing to do in this matchup as Pork is to build meter passively while walking around, as Pork gets a lot more use of meter out than Garlic does. So if both players have 2 bars and it's in neutral, Pork has the advantage there, and you want to be able to use that effectively if the player is trying to use a life lead to force you to approach. See, without meter, you can't confirm an uppercut without risking and getting punished on block. So, a few things I want to highlight during this set specifically. Asskadoodle was holding his bursts a lot, and it was really costing Waddle whenever he went for a burst bait, and Asskadoodle was able to get out with full 2 bars. In a lot of scenarios, if you're not sure whether your opponent's going to burst or not, it's probably the better option to go forward with a full combo, because worst case scenario, they burst and they have no meter. If you gotta go for a burst bait, which means you have to read that they're going to burst and read on the exact hit they're going to burst. The worst case scenario, if you fail, is that they're out of the combo and they have full meter, which you probably will not have. And full meter in TLA is very useful. You can reject, you can burst out of a later combo, you get basically 2 free mistakes if you do an unsafe move on block. So a lot of times against burst, it's better to just go through with the full combo unless it's in a scenario where you're going to die if you don't make the burst. On to Wilton versus Asskadoodle. Wilton in this set shows more proficiency against dealing with Asskadoodle's playstyle than Waddle does. We're going to see how that goes, especially in the last game. Of course, Asskadoodle using that Spice Walk's back speed. It's a reject. Wilton has 2 bars now, so he can definitely make this comeback, but he gets clipped and doesn't decide to burst out. Also, in that scenario specifically against Garlic, if he tries to follow up a hit with a sneak, you could mash the input forward in special. And then if he sneaks, you will burst it 100% of the time, and if he doesn't sneak, you won't get burst baited because he won't be behind you. So it's very useful to know in these kind of scenarios where you're going to die from the sneak that you just mash success in order to get a guaranteed burst on the sneak. Asskadoodle gets a lucky dash trip there on his jump. Jumping in Spice Diddles is usually not a great option. I mean, especially against Onion with a frame 1 parry, but even against Garlic, you can easily get clipped by a roundhouse because that's such a high hitbox. You take a lot of damage for it. In addition to that, if you get anti-air, you get knocked down, and both Spices have great pressure on knockdown. Wilton does get the burst this time, but gets clipped again by Asskadoodle's roundhouse. Asskadoodle a lot of times will walk back and then predict exactly when you're going to walk forward and hit you with the very tip of roundhouse, so you walk right into it. See, some of this bait's very good at. Gonna get a good combo from that. He uses full bar, which may not be worth it here, considering the damage he gets from the parry. But he does manage to get the sneaky reset on him using the hop fake. It's a very useful thing to do. Some counterplay to those kind of hop fake resets is the fact that you can press a button at a certain timing so that it comes out after a hop kick would hit, but before the opponent would be actionable after a hop fake ends. And in that scenario, you can just buffer a jab if you see hop kick come out, or buffer a sweep if you think they're gonna walk back and try to whiff punish it. And since Asskadoodle did have 2 bars there, buffering a sweep is pretty non-committal. You can always RC out, and you can always RC out of the roundhouse if they block it. Yes, that's one thing. One thing Asskadoodle loves to do is to play defensive, walk back, and then start whiff punishing a lot. Whiff punishing a lot in order to condition the opponent to stop pressing. Once they stop pressing, he'll do that dash in right there. And it's important against players who use that kind of playstyle with Garlic to stuff the dashes preemptively while not putting yourself at risk. And you can see Wilton doing that here by walking back and sweeping, because if you sweep from a far enough distance, Garlic won't be able to whiff punish it. But if he dashes in, you get a whiff punish. You see he's doing it there all the time. And then he gets the sweep, getting a throw. Now Wilton gets the parry. Another try for a burst bait. And again, in that scenario, you usually just want to go ahead and finish the combo instead of going for the burst here, because Like, look at this health. Wilton has so much health. Asskadoodle has barely any. In addition to that, worst case scenario, Asskadoodle bursts. He has no bar. This is how much health he has. Best case scenario for getting a burst base, he wins the round, but best case scenario for not going for burst base, he also wins the round. So the risk reward is extremely skewed in order for you to not burst bait in that scenario. This burst right here is a bad burst. You never want to burst, never want to delay a burst against someone who's linking a string, because you delay a burst and they go for the combo and like they use a jab or something like that, it's fast enough, your burst will not come out in time before their jab recovers and it'll get blocked. And so you want to burst as soon as possible on a hit if you're reading that they're going to continue the combo, or stuff like that happens. It happens a lot against Spices because they have fast, heavy, and a fast jab. Another weakness of a playstyle like Asskadoodle's is that he ends up walking himself into the corner a lot. As you can see at the beginning of the round, he does it here. Now, with characters like Garlic or Rice who can cross up on one combo, it's a little bit less of a problem. But you still find that, here Onion gets a corner combo where if you got that mid screen, all he would get is 5H roundhouse or 5H hopkick for mix. So they're getting the trip guard anti-air. Yeah, when you're far away like that, it's usually not a good idea to jump, especially against Spices, because they can easily trip guard your jump with a sweep and get a pretty good combo, especially Garlic. Both have full meter. Wilton decides to burst. Yeah, when you're in the corner though, like when you're comboing an opponent and you're the person in the corner, bursting is actually, burst baiting tends to be a better option than it usually is, because if you get bursted, not only is your combo gone, but you're now knocked down and in the corner. And especially as Garlic, that's a bad situation. In this situation, it should basically just be Asskadoodle winning, right? He's got a bar, so he's got full meter. He's got a pretty good life lead. All he has to do really is just avoid getting hit for 10 seconds. With Wilton having no bar, he just sneaks, and that's unfortunate right there. He drops the roundhouse punish, because it would have been a sweep punish on the roundhouse, and he would have gotten the round there. And then this play from Wilton, amazing play, walks full screen and throws him at the last second. Now, don't get me wrong, this is a really great play by Wilton, but it was also a big misplay from Asskadoodle here. All they had to do here, at that moment, right before he got thrown, was backflip. And he would have won the round guaranteed. This is because of the fact that the invincible 4S's, specifically a backflip and teleport, their weakness is that they're punishable once they lose the invincibility. When the time runs out, they don't have time to run out of invincibility, and you won't have enough time to take the amount of damage you need in order to win the round. So this throw could have been avoided by Asskadoodle just backflipping, and Wilton would have lost the round. But great play by Wilton nonetheless, and Wilton wins this set. Okay, me versus Asskadoodle. Garlic Ditto. Round start. Round start in Tough Love Arena is pretty different from most fighting games. See, just look how far away these two characters are standing away from each other. The amount of distance. There's no way either one of their pokes can reach from here until they walk forward, right? So, because of the amount of distance here, the optimal play, 90% of the time, is to walk right in and close the distance immediately for both players, right? If it's a ditto, the opponent's not an advantage at any really point in space without health and life being different. So you just want to walk forward to close the gap, get the opponent closer to the corner than you are, right? Asskadoodle does not do this. I walk forward, Asskadoodle walks back. This puts him closer to the corner. And while, of course, it doesn't matter too much due to the fact that we're both Garlics, we both can just sneak in that combo and immediately cross up and put ourselves in the corner, it does make it neutral a little harder if I get him all the way to the corner. So I just want to point that out. I just kind of sneaking around, and of course I catch him here. A very important thing to do against Garlic is to react to when you see the startup of dash and press in order to stop what they're doing. Doing that is very important. You can see I did that here. Asskadoodle spends bar with the roundhouse RC and they immediately go sweep dash, and I of course catch it with a jab. Or sorry, not jab, sweep. No, it is jab, never mind. And then I go for a throw. So, even though sweep is -2 on block, because of the threat of DAC roundhouse, you can get a lot of mileage off of sweeping on block and then still being able to continue your pressure. You see there, he doesn't want to press. Stagger pressure is pretty important in a strike throw only game. It's very important to utilize that effectively. You can do it with meats, you can do it with carbs, but to a lesser extent. And of course, spices are really good at doing it. Yeah, at this spacing, there's something called a spaced jump, which is when you space a jump outside of their anti-air range, but still able to hit them. This is, mainly utilized in carbs versus spices. Well, it used to be anyway, but now Noodle has frenzy, so he doesn't have to worry about that too much. But you space it like right outside of their jab range. Now, usually you can't do it against spices because their walk speed is so fast that, one, it's easier for them to get out of the range quickly, and two, it's hard to predict exactly where they'll be when your jump lands. But because Asskadoodle, of course, walks back a lot, likes to go walking back in this direction, I know he's going to be about here to here when the jump lands. And I can space right outside of his jab range, which will be like right about here, in order to get that space jump, which he can't jab anti-air, but he also can't really trip guard because it's still going to hit. And you can see, because of that, he can't anti-air it, and I get free mix off of it. Of course, still walking back. I go for it again, and once again, he can't trip guard it, even though he tries. I end up dropping the combo. I do it again. You see, I'm really just abusing it against him. You can't anti-air if you know exactly where they're going to be when you jump. Now I have a life lead. 33 seconds left. And I'm doing the same thing. Sweeping outside of out of whiff punish range, but inside dash range in order to just stuff him in case he goes. Asskadoodle not moving here. I go into a walk-up jab. He gets the dash trip, but now I'm just walking back. 15 seconds left. I sneak, run away again, sneak, run away again. Against really defensive players, you're able to abuse the fact that they're going to run away and not approach, even if the time is getting low. Because of that, it's kind of just an easy time out there. I just reject, hold walking back, and there's nothing you can do. It's very important that even if you have a defensive playstyle, if you don't have the life lead and it's 30 seconds left, the opponent doesn't have to approach you unless you're playing like a card and you can chip them out, right? So in the spice deal, the opponent just really doesn't have to approach you if you're playing a spice. And that's something that is always good to recognize and decide to work your way in, even if there's 30 seconds, even if there's 40 seconds left, because they can decide to stand back. It's only a minute they need to stay, right? They can just decide to stand back and just build meter by walking, shimmying, stuffing anything that you would be able to do with really no risk to you unless you decide to go in fully. Because Asskadoodle to commit there, it would cost them the round. Alright, and then the final set for this VOD review. Me versus Wilton Laws. Dash up roundhouse after a burst. It's a pretty decent option. If you have meter, it's safe. I mean, it's safe against most characters anyway, but in Spice Dittos, you need to have meter to make it safe, which is why I stated there. A lot of times, of course, when a guard plays far away, they'll just sneak, right? So, using this instead to bait the jab or the parry, whatever you think they're going to do, to hit them with a roundhouse in their face, is usually a decent option. But it's better used when you have bar. Without bar, it's pretty risky. It's very important to memorize habits your opponent have after like a set scenario, like after a burst, after a reject. You see here, Wilton walks up and tries to press a button. That's something to remember when you're playing against anybody, right? After a throw, what they do. After a reject, what they do. This time he doesn't walk forward. See, he's also noticing patterns from me. I like to roundhouse and then roundhouse immediately again to catch someone trying to whiff punish. And he counters that by walking into sweep punish range and getting the punish there. Pressure is very important. A lot of players will do a sort of delayed mash out of your wake up. Or will do a slower button like a sweep to catch me trying to back or walk back and whiff punish. The thing you can do here to beat both those options at the same time is to delay your jab to hit them later in their wake up frames. It also beats them around reversal parry. So doing that allows you to get usually a counter hit on whatever they're trying to do, and then you get some pretty big damage. An important thing about burst baiting is that it doesn't have to be an all or nothing burst bait. There's a lot of scenarios where I can dash here and then wait. If he doesn't burst, I can still go for an attack later on that he has to burst. So when the opponent's in the air, it's a lot easier to burst bait than on the ground. Get the roundhouse. An actual amazing burst by Wilton here. So this is the kind of burst you want to make. even if you're forced to make a burst. He doesn't burst immediately, and you can actually burst a jumping on reaction if you're fast enough. Basically, you can burst jumping on reaction. So he's probably looking for that right now. He sees I'm not going for it, and I'm waiting until he gets low enough to go for a roundhouse to make sure he doesn't early burst, and he bursts at just the right time to go through it. And I get him to press on the sweep, and this time I try to force a burst, but he just ends up not bursting. In those scenarios, he's at sliver of health. It's basic, and I'm at full health. You should definitely be forcing the burst there, and there's not much reason to try to go for a burst bit. So that's gonna be the VOD review for TLG52. Some of the higher stats: Waddle versus Asskadoodle, Asskadoodle versus Wilton, me versus Asskadoodle, and me versus Wilton. So main takeaway from this VOD review is against defensive players. If they're trying to force you to approach using the life lead, you should instead build meter before going in first. Meter allows you to, burst out if they end up hitting you in neutral. It also allows you to get pressure easier, especially in matchups where you have the longer poke, like, meats versus spices or carbs versus anybody but other carbs. It's very useful to have that to just get in at a moment's notice. In addition to that, if you don't have a life lead and you're playing against someone who, is a bit more patient than you, you have to go in eventually. You can't just wait there, and it'll cause you to lose the round, or you have to wait for them to make a big mistake in order to get the round eventually, right? So that's going to be the VOD review. You guys know I hate to shield, but actually I don't, so go ahead and hit that subscribe button. I'll have a new video coming out, I don't know, soon, hopefully within the next week. And see you then.